recognizing that you are not in control of everything. So taking a deep breath and then saying, what is mine to do in this moment? And in a fire, you get real focused on what is yours to do. And yet it's a valid question to ask yourself all the time when we have a lot of changes as we do in our world right now.
Hello, and welcome to the Hello You Show, where big dreams meet real action. Through transformative stories, a bit of neuroscience, and real conversations, this show is here to help you explore creating your next level life with authenticity and passion. I am Jessica Rice, a design techie and former engineering leader turned vision evolution coach on a mission to help other women rise up and lead a life of purpose. So get cozy and say hello again to the real you. Welcome back to the Hello You Show. My name is Jessica Rice and I am your host. And today we have an incredible guest joining us. Carole Hodges is a transformational coach who supports women leaders over 50 to build a life they love with deep purpose and resilience in our crazy world. She is the author of the Menopause Millionaire, Keys to Prosperity and Meaning in the Second Half of Your Life. And she uses the principles of science and proven models of infinite intelligence. Carole, I am so excited to have you on the show with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Let us know, where are you joining in from today?
I'm in a little town called Fallbrook, California. It's in the top end of San Diego County.
Oh, there was an earthquake there recently.
There was. Being a native Californian, first I thought we're very close to Camp Pendleton, and sometimes they drop bombs and it shakes. But this one kept going. I knew immediately what it was, and I'm close enough. I tell you, earthquakes, my mind, being all trained for it, goes, do I go for the doorway? And I thought, no, the front door is right there. Go outside. But I find it's amazing when you are confronted with any kind of a problem that you will go to what's kind of already inside. And that's what I did.
Yeah, totally. Well, we're just a little north of you in the central coast of California, so we've had a few earthquakes too. But it is kind of interesting once you've gone through a few, how your mind thinks about it. Yeah. Well, I know you have this, just a really incredible background. You have a incredible journey, I would say, that you have been on. Would you mind sharing with us just a little bit about, kind of some of the work that you do, and then maybe we can dive in a little bit on your story and how you came to this incredible work?
Sure. Actually, I believe in kind of being in the now, and I just happened to have a picture that came from 2021 right out in front of my house, and it's a picture of a close-up of hummingbirds in a nest. It was one of those miraculous little times that this hummingbird put their nest low enough that as I walked out my front door, we could see it. And of course, with a phone, I could zoom in on it. And I mention it just because one principle I find gets me a long ways is being in the now. And that just happened and reminded me of the little miracles of life. But what got me on my journey was that I had studied coaching for many years in a variety of different things. But in October 2023, October 3rd, I was sitting there with my husband watching the television, and all of a sudden we smelled something electrical and got up looking around the house because it's like, we have to find whatever this is. And looked and looked, didn't see anything. He went out to walk the dogs, and I looked a little further into our storage area in the back. A puff of smoke came through the wall, and I knew it was the workshop that was outside. So I'm yelling to him, it's in the workshop. He runs back there. Each of us has a phone in one hand and a fire extinguisher in the other. And we quickly find out. He gets back there, is driven back by smoke. We find out our fire extinguisher doesn't work. And that evening, we got everybody out safe. We got the people out safe. We got our animals out safe. And after it seemed like forever, the fire engines came. And when my husband first saw this fire, it was about 2 feet tall underneath a workbench. By the time the firemen got there, it was above the roof. And basically, we watched as they were fighting flames. And in the process, my husband looks at me and he says, we've lost everything. And I looked, and the front of the house looked just fine. Flames in the back, but the front looked fine. And even though we may have lost everything, a feeling of peace came over me. And I mentioned that to him, and he admitted feeling it too. Well, hours later, when the fire was pretty much out, the last fireman was there double checking everything. We went up and asked if we could look inside. And because the front looked fine, I was very hopeful that maybe the inside would look fine. But as we opened the door, first of all, there was 2 inches of water. The fireman told us we could not go in. And with all the water putting it out, the ceiling was now on the furniture. Walls and everything in it was blackened. And I then realized that, yes, we had indeed lost quite a bit, much more than I expected. I asked the fireman, however, to go over and get my purse that was hanging on a wall and had the keys to my car in it. So he went and got it and brought it to me. And on the way back, he pulled a little Post-it that I had on the back of the front door. And he smiled and handed it to me. I'd forgotten it was there. It said, how can I enjoy this moment even more right now? And he smiled, and the two of us had a good laugh together at that as I looked at my blackened house. And then he also told me something that I had never heard before. He said, I find that there are 2 kinds of people when there's something that happens, like a fire. He said, there are those who are in complete mourning. They have felt like they've lost everything. And there are those who recognize their good fortune in that life goes on. And they can see that. And he said, and there's a vast difference in how fast they recover. And I began to realize that that day began to start my life over again, because we had lost quite a bit. And it took the next month clearing things out. My kitchen, I was able to take out my dishes and many things and wash them off and box them up. And in the end, we had a 10 by 20 storage unit that had whatever we had left. And I was thinking maybe we'd live in a trailer for a little while. Since we didn't own much, I thought, why not completely simplify? And then just the week I was ready to get going on that very Monday morning, I got a text from a friend, and one that I hadn't spoken to in quite a while. And she said, I heard what happened. Would you like to have this? It's a large room with your own bathroom and closet that you could both live in exchange for watching my 90-year-old mom. And my first thought was, well, I have to meet your mom. Because, of course, not every 90-year-old is one that I would want to be with for an extended period of time. But her mother was delightful, absolutely delightful. She did a lot of things for herself, but really could not live alone. And it was mainly making food for her, checking in on her, making sure she was okay. And it turned out to be a real blessing for us. And in that time, I came across studying dream building. And all of a sudden, the thought of some simple things like noticing what you're noticing in your life, and being very present in understanding how to create a life that you would love living. It suddenly made a link with everything I had ever read. no matter what coaching technique, no matter what spiritual philosophy, suddenly it was like the world opening that I could see it's all the same. It's all the same. We say it in many voices because we have 8 billion people on the earth. So they need to hear it in different ways, just like different languages. The principles are the same, and yet you may hear it in different ways.
Mm.
And that's what really led me into creating a life change navigator. It had started with my book, The Menopause Millionaire, because there is a change that happens in midlife, and not for women. Yes, it's menopause, and we're very well aware of it. But deeper than that, at the middle of life, you have a different perspective. There's a great quote by Steve Jobs, which is, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back.
Mm.
In midlife, you have a good amount of life to look back and say, what is really your gift? What makes you unique? And what is your human adventure? Because I believe we are here and we know we had a beginning. We will have an end to this human adventure. But what is it we are doing while we are here? And so that has become really my focus. I write about it. I take people through a process to explore within themselves, because each person, you're the only one who can make the change within yourself. But if you understand how life works, the system, then it makes all the difference. So that's been my journey.
Mm. So much in there to unpack. Thank you for sharing. And, some of the things that stand out too, as you were describing the experiences that you've had, is speaking of connecting the dots. It's interesting to me. So I had gone through a fire myself, but we didn't lose our house. But just that moment where our fireplace place had caught up into flames and we were in a hurry. At the time, it was my mother and I trying to grab pots of water and the fire extinguisher and calling the fire department to come. There's a lot going on during something like
Yeah.
that. What what enabled you to have the amount of personal resilience and maybe even stoicism to just handle that moment?
That is a good question that I have asked myself, because I realize that some of it, like the earthquakes that we talked about, is if you thought about it ahead of time, like a fire extinguisher. We had them, and of course, I knew where they were and to grab one when there's a fire. And of course, the phone, because they're almost attached to us these days, it's like that's our main communication. So some of it is trained in. And yet I also realize that one of the biggest changes has been just the recognition that I call this our human life adventure game. Just acknowledging. And I think there's a strength when we eh, know, acknowledge, and feel that it's quite normal that we're going to pass at some point. And yet we want to fit in all that we can so that we make this life worthwhile. And I think that recognition also helps.
Mm.
Kind of giving up control, recognizing that you are not in control of everything. So taking a deep breath and then saying, what is mine to do in this moment? And in a fire, you get real focused on what is yours to do. And yet it's a valid question to ask yourself all the time when we have a lot of changes, as we do in our world right now. It is a good thing to say, what is mine to do? And that comes back to your desires, your personal gifts of what comes natural, what you can do, what you want to do in this world. Because once you accept that and that you can't change everything, even as things change in our world, you or I, we don't get to change it. We can't put it back in the box to the days before we had, computers and artificial intelligence and all. It's changing. And we either get to say, how does it impact me? How can I use it? Or, step back from it and just accept it's there. Change is happening. And I think that creates resilience when you have a peace within yourself that you are making the choices right for you.
I'm curious too about, you mentioned that you typically tend to work with people who are kind of in midlife and beyond. Do you feel like it's experiences? You mentioned kind of connecting those dots. Do you feel like it's experiences that people have in their lives that help them to start looking at their life a little bit differently? If they were younger and they had a lot of experiences, would they be at the same maturity level as others? I'm curious your thoughts around this.
That's a good question. I find that sense of maturity and recognition, yes, it can happen at a younger age. However, sometimes I've met people who at a very young age had losses. Um, I don't recommend it. I cleared out my house, but I don't recommend a fire as a good way to do it. And in the same way that people can have challenging experiences and learn from them. And I've seen that kind of maturity happen. By midlife, undoubtedly you have had them. And I have spoken to people who've had different challenges, health challenges. Sometimes it's younger people who they have a family that was not supportive. They had to learn some things the tough way in life, and they had a different experience. So it can happen at any age, but I find people will self-select when they begin to relate, to say, okay, yes, I can begin to understand that this is my human life adventure, and where am I at it? I might be at the earlier stage, but I think the older you get, I find I could look back. I could look back at times and what called to me that didn't make sense to me at the time, because there was a time that I was called to do musical theater. It was a local group. It was Peninsula Civic Light Opera, and I was in Northern California. They had a big stage, 1,500 seat theater, a full orchestra, and yet these were all volunteers. It was the community that came in and put this on, and we had the full costumes from Broadway. And I was a young mom. I don't know why. I was terrified of auditions. This wasn't like I waltzed in there and just did it and it was great fun. No, I heard about it because I was taking dance class, and I walked into the first audition, and I had prepared my music, signed in, and then walked across this big stage and delivered my music to the accompanist and walked center stage. And I had to wait till the director said, okay. And when they did, all of a sudden, my body froze. My hands at my side. I couldn't move. Almost nothing came out. And then once I was done, the last note was played, I could relax and go over and pick up my music. Now, of course, I didn't get in. That was followed by 3 more auditions where almost the same thing happened. I kept doing more preparation. I even brought my children to help sign me in because my hand was shaking so hard I couldn't write my own name. And I looked back and said, why did I do that? Because you think a normal person, if obviously you're not getting cast, this doesn't seem to be a natural gift of yours. Why are you doing it? It's only when I look back and I got through so much fear is what I finally decided to do is I'm going to go to every audition around, and it doesn't matter if there's no roles for me. In fact, it's better if there's no roles for me. because then I will just keep practicing auditioning until I can at least audition and they can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I did get in things. And then I set my sights on roles. And then I did have a chance to do roles and be center stage. And the interesting thing is, it was never about being center stage. It wasn't so much about me as being part of a world that was alive and high vibe. And I recognized that was part of it. And as I look back now, my marriage was falling apart before that.
Mm.
And I realized that my children were young. And I realized by having that particular outlet, first of all, it lifted me up so that I could continue on. My youngest child, who started going with me to auditions, or well, not to auditions, but to rehearsals, when she was about 5 and she could sit there, she would go to the rehearsals with me. And she ended up being backstage on sound. And then she went on to become an actress. So I look and say, maybe all of that was perfectly designed. And even taking on other characters. Once you can look back and connect the dots, everybody will have their own experience, but you begin to see why things make sense. Why now I really relish being on stages and large stages, but not to sing and dance, to have people recognize that strength within themselves.
Oh, I love that story because it really further demonstrates too how sometimes we do give up on certain things in our lives because we are afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And then we think, like you said, well, this obviously isn't a good fit for me, so why am I continuing? And we have to kind of push through. We have to prove to ourselves that we can and we will. Maybe we have to get over some things, but we can do hard things and still thrive.
Yes, I tend to call those paradigms.
Mm.
Paradigms are, because we all have the voice in ourselves that knows what we would love, that
Mhm.
knows, okay, here's the ideal, health and wellness and relationships, and here's how I want to express myself, and time and money freedom. Having a balance of those is so important in life. There are many programs that help you make more money. Let's see, if you make more money, but you don't have your health or your relationships, you're not doing something you love, you're not feeling good about life. So, but when you bring them all together and you begin to look at a life that you would love, there's also a little internal voices that will say, how do you know you can do that? You've never done that before. And believe me, that was part of what I had to overcome. I hadn't been on a stage singing, dancing. And so it was overcoming that voice within myself, that even to get into the point of, we call it DEFCON, where, you shake. It's taking you over physically. And yet, anything that you want that you don't already have is outside this like invisible barbed wire of your comfort zone. If you haven't done it before, then of course your voice in the head will tell you something like, you've never done that before. What makes you think you can do that? We all learn things by trial and error. We learned how to walk by falling down over and over again. And if we remind ourselves and live from that energy of what it is that we're creating, because every day when I was afraid to be on the stage and I was having terrible auditions, in my mind, I could imagine the freedom of being able to be out on a stage. And just the beauty of musical theater is that these are not the life and death situations we find ourselves in. No, when you are in a musical, there are problems and they all get resolved by the end. But there was a process of freedom in singing and dancing with other people that was my vision. And I kept envisioning that even when I would get up and croak during auditions. That kept me going. And a strong vision is what helps you move forward, just knowing it's possible. And you don't know the path. And once you get clear, it's amazing. Doors can open where you least expect.
It makes me think of all of my childhood too, and some of the theater that I had done as well, and what that was that brought that to light. What do you feel led you from, kind of experiencing, that piece of your life and then moving into where you are now as a coach and wanting to work with people and help them gain clarity on kind of their next chapter in life?
And this is something that I outlined in my book, The Menopause Millionaire, is there was a time, and I mentioned my marriage was falling apart for quite a while, and then the business was falling apart. And then my oldest daughter, who had just graduated from NYU, summa cum laude, she moved home, and it was clear that even though she was absolutely brilliant, she was very talented. She was a dancer, and she danced with the Merce Cunningham Company, and yet she was also bipolar. So I had a combination of no money coming in, my bipolar daughter, and I was working as a temp just to bring in enough money to buy groceries. And we did find a psychiatrist for her. And he began to want to see her. He said, it would be much better if she could come in at least twice a week. But we didn't have insurance. There wasn't any way to pay for it at the time. We just couldn't do it. I mean, because what I was earning was all there was that was coming in, and we were not even paying the mortgage. In that period of time, in that 1 year, I came home one day after just picking up my younger daughter from the train station. In the 20 minutes I was gone, Corinne had taken her own life. That was a very, very difficult time. And then following that, we had a bankruptcy and a divorce. And it wasn't until many years later that I began to realize that was all within 1 year, because I had 2 more children, and I had to keep on going. So I found a job, and I started a new job 2 weeks after her funeral. And for a while, well, first of all, I didn't want to let anybody know where I worked, what was actually going on in my life, because I was afraid they would think I was unbalanced, and then I wouldn't even have a job. And my job was keeping me going. And eventually I got enough money to move out, which was just before we lost the house. But right after that, I began to look further to say, look, I have to take responsibility too. What was my part in all of this? And I began to look for ideas. What could I look at? And one of those, I always believe when 3 people tell you something, that it's something to pay attention to. So 3 people who did not know each other at all, they were from different areas of my life, all suggested that I go to a weekend, personal development weekend. And I did, and this was all about looking at our rackets, which are the things that we tell ourselves that keep us locked in our own way of thinking. And we learned some techniques of just telling our story without all of the innuendos and emotion that we put onto it. I listened. It was 3 days, and finally the 3rd day, I raised my hand to tell my story, and I told just the facts. And with that, what I learned is person after person came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I realized after that weekend that I wasn't going to claim that as my identity. I could be poor Carol. Yes, it was based upon facts, not just emotion. But I made the decision. I didn't choose to go through life as poor Carol. So I did not write about it. I didn't talk about it at all for another 20 years before I could even begin to write my book, when it became it became something different. It became a way to be of service, to say that we will all have our challenges and they'll be different. I'm blessed in the challenges I didn't have. I've had enough in my life, and there may be more. I have no idea. But that's when I began to realize that this is something no one's ever taught, but you're really in charge of learning from your own life and of choosing how you want to move forward. So in ways I can feel, well, maybe gratitude's not the right word, but I can accept all that has happened and recognize what I've learned from it, and then live in the now. Because, and that's, I think, what we all want. When you can be in this moment, in now, and leave behind the rest and be in that place that we talked about of looking forward and yet not knowing what's going to happen. None of us know what will happen next week, next year. We know there's change happening. But the more you can be in the now, you can say, well, in this moment, I'm fine. In this moment, I'm here and having this wonderful opportunity to talk to people wherever they are in the world. That's one of the amazing things about our lives these days. So looking for where you can be in the moment, finding the people, the opportunities, the vision that really helps you is, well, that's the work of each of us. And some of us are here to help you with it. But when I coach, it's like, I'm not a prescriptive coach, but an evocative coach. In other words, the answers are within you. Mm-hmm. Because our lives are individual. So thank you for asking.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. And I think it's incredibly powerful to hear your perspective on something that, most of us can't, fully imagine. We're talking about some of our greatest fears, I believe. And there's this piece in here when you're talking about being in the now. And I feel this too sometimes when I'm, we're have a vision for the future, but then it's a matter of like, well, how do I want to be present today so that some of that future can be in existence? And whether that's being present for my son, in moments for myself, or even in my business or different things that I'm doing. I'm also intrigued because I think I had shared with you, I've gone through definitely some challenges with abusive relationships and health, and my mother too growing up, she lost both of her parents when she was 10. And so it's interesting when we talk to different people who've gone through these really challenging experiences in their lives, how we're able to process. And I find that a lot of times that's where I see people too who want to go and help others be better, do better, create more in their lives, and recognize the gift that they do have. And so when you said, maybe it's not gratitude, but life, we can't control it all, but it is a gift. Mm-hmm. And we have a choice with how we show up in it. So thank you for sharing. That was, it's a beautiful perspective that you bring, and that you're bringing to your clients in such a way where they can look within, as you said.
Yes, that's where we find the answers, is within. And I have a little picture behind me, which is my mother's needlepoint. And I think her perspective is part of what I grew up with. And it says, one ship sails east, another west, by the self-same winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sails and not the gales that determine where they go. Hmm. And see, the set of the sails is what we're in charge of. We can set our own sails. We don't get to control the wind or the waves.
So very poignant, I believe, for those who are listening, those who are thinking about what's next in their lives, what is it that they're wanting to do. So tell us a little bit more about some of the work then. When people are coming to you, are they looking for a big change in their life, or is it, are they recognizing that I have this next chapter and I'm wanting to do something different with it? Or what is that looking like?
I'm finding that there are two kinds of clients who come to me. And some are, yes, having faced some issues. One recent woman, has faced health issues that she's gone through and overcome and have changed her life. And now I feel like it's just like as I was after the fire. Now, without all my stuff, who am I?
Mm.
Well, without all in this case, health that I took for granted, who am I? Another, she was actually not ready to retire, but had health issues. For her, it was without my job, who am I?
Mm.
For others, their kids are grown. It's without my kids, without my little kids, who am I now that they're adults? So that's one type of person that is kind of rediscovering themselves. Another kind of person is those who know they're about big things. They want to change the world. And recently, some ones who've come to me about changing the way our healthcare is delivered in this country and other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at that because they have a vision and they have no idea how to do it, or they have kind of an idea, but they're really not sure. And then working with them, some of that is plunging deeper into that identity, into how they show up, into coming from their vision, and then paying attention to the good things that show up, because that's what I find. Just like that magical phone call for a place to stay, you do not know and how to be in that position of continuing to ask for what you want, and yet the next person you meet in the grocery store might be the person who connects with you. So those are really the two type of people that I have found who come to me. And yes, there are some men too.
Well, I know you have some incredible, resources on your website. What's the best way people can get in touch with you?
Yes, my website is lifechangenavigator.com. I call myself a life change navigator, and I have sailed. Above me was a boat that I sailed on, and learned that sailing is just not on always nice days. You have to learn to fight winds and waves. So I felt it was quite an appropriate name. But on that site, I do have the bottom in abundance now. And that's something that you can just take that, and you'll find different thoughts that will have you stop, be in the now. And even in just a few minutes a day, when you're able to kind of let go of the past and just be in the moment, the future's not here and you don't know what it's going to be anyhow. That is, I believe, part of what can give you a strength. You'll find that in so many different ways, but I will tell you, being able, whether it's in nature, having a tool like this so that even while you're sitting in front of your computer, as I do many days, you can pull something up that can allow you just to take a couple deep breaths in, let them out slowly, and introduce a new thought to allow you to be more of yourself. So, and with that, then you'll also find that anybody who really wants a personal deep dive, I have a discovery call,
Mm.
and you can schedule them right there. And that's my gift. I will tell you, after everything, I feel like I've been given so much that, yes, having a chance to help somebody get started on that deep dive and begin to see what's next for them, that's my gift.
Mm. Well, thank you so much. We will definitely put all of that into the show notes so that everyone can get in touch. I always like to ask a final question. So, you know, if someone's considering, what's that next step for them? What does that look like? And maybe they even feel or they're questioning, is it even worth it? Is it even worth trying to do something more with this next piece of my life, however long that is? Are there any messages or words that you would share?
Yes, I mean, just what comes to me is you're worth it. That I believe each of us came here for our own purpose. Now, my personal belief is that before we were born, we may have made choices of our family, the challenges that we might encounter. And if you think of it like pulling out a game, that we all have our own endpoint. Just knowing that you don't need to look like anybody else. Your vision is your own and your game is your own. So yes, just knowing that as long as you're breathing, you have more life. And why not acknowledge that you have the power to make it a life that you would love, no matter what that looks like. It could be a very simple life. It could be someone who wants to change the world. Your formula is yours. Your life is yours, and you're living it. So that means you get to choose exactly what you're doing.
Well, I feel like I could spend all day talking to you. You are such a delight. You have so much wisdom that you bring, but in such a very comforting way also. So thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing with us.
Oh, Jessica, I'm thrilled. And I am so glad we connected. That was one of those little happy coincidences that happens, and I feel very blessed. I'm very happy to have been here.
Well, I definitely agree. It's always exciting to meet people like you and get to know more about your story, and also share that so that others can also feel inspired and recognize that I do feel like within all of us we have this capability to do something miraculous with our lives if we just choose.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And thank you to all of our listeners for joining in. Please get in touch with Carol. She has some amazing gifts for you, so much wisdom to share. And stay tuned for next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Hello You Show. It's been a pleasure to have you with us on this journey today. If you found value in our conversation and want to support the show, please take a moment to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd also deeply appreciate it if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us grow, but also enables others seeking inspiration and authenticity to discover our community. Until next time, keep embracing your story with purpose.